Hey, it's good to be in Charleston. Southern hospitality is real. I'm thankful to be here. You know, this is one of the first times, whenever you travel, you always get, churches give you these gift baskets. This is the first time in a gift basket I received a bowl of shrimp and grits in my gift basket. I'm kidding, I didn't receive that, but I should have. It seemed like it was everywhere I went, there's shrimp and grits. I mean, I've been literally blown away by Charleston. I feel like I've been so ignorant of Charleston. I didn't know much about the city, the history. I'm just falling in love with the people. It's beautiful. I knew that there was something spiritually significant about it. You know, a friend of mine did a film. I did a documentary called Emmanuel about the shooting that took place. And if you haven't seen this documentary, it will blow your mind because it shows the power of the church in this city. You know, when this shooting took place, there were these people trying to rise up. I'm sure you guys know the story. Obviously, you lived here. But try to stir up all this trouble. But these worshipers would come in the middle of it and just worship. And it would just silence all that. And then when the church began to forgive, they interviewed the people trying to stir up the trouble. And they were like, man, as soon as they forgive, we couldn't mobilize anymore. And I was like, man, it was so telling. But the power of the church in this city, there's a real battle, right, over the city. But the church, you guys are positioned for such a time as this. So anyway, I just want to honor you guys in this city for what you guys carry. I love the beautiful, all the color in here, the culture. It's amazing. It's like heaven in here. So, all right, I'm going to pray and then we're going to jump in, all right? Father, I thank you for Charleston. I thank you for the call of God on this place, this city, these people. And thank you for the word that you've given me for them. I pray, Lord, for open hearts, open heavens. We invite your angelic host to come minister among us, to set minds free, to set hearts free, to bring healing, deliverance, freedom. And Lord, I pray that we have ears to hear what you're saying and eyes to see what you're doing in this hour. In Jesus' name. Jesus' name. So I was praying and I have a word for you guys. And the title of my sermon is called Look Again, but I stole the title from a song my wife wrote. She wrote this song a couple of weeks ago, and I was preparing the sermon. She began to sing this song, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's so divinely timed. So I want to talk about how to see today, how you see, right? We're in a significant moment in history right now. It's very significant. I believe that how we see will determine our future. All right, y'all with me? So just recently, I was with my son, my youngest son, and he's been really struggling with fear out of nowhere, okay? But in the midst of this struggle with fear, he had one of the greatest encounters he's ever had in his life. So we're coming home one day from his football practice. He's 8 years old. He starts talking about these irrational fears out of nowhere. And I'm like, buddy, where are you getting this? So I started talking to him about taking his thoughts captive to the obedience of Christ. And he's like, well, what's taking your thoughts captive mean? You know, you had to break it down for a kid. And I was like, okay, well, captive is like you put it in prison. I go, because first of all, you know you're not your thoughts. I go, you're not your thoughts. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he, not here. And so I go, you can observe your thought. You can judge your thought. You can be like, this is God, this is the devil. You can observe these things, right? You can reject the thought, you can take a thought captive, or if you allow it in, that thought can overtake you. And if it's God's thought, you want that to overtake you, but you don't want to be overtaken by the enemy's thought. So we have to understand the difference between the two. So I go, you can take this thought captive to make it obedient to Christ. You have to know the word of God to be able to flip the script, right? So the enemy might be saying one thing, and if you take that in, what's it going to do to you? Fear, anxiety, insecurity, shame, guilt, condemnation, all these things, you begin to feel the darkness. But if you have the word of God come in, it begins to fill you with light. So I just began to share this just an example to try to make it practical for him, right? And so I was talking about how in 2020, I was walking through the airport, people just started wearing masks. It was brand new, you're watching the videos, seeing people die in China, all this stuff. And I'm walking through the airport and I'm seeing these masks pop up in people, and then these thoughts start to hit me. You're gonna die, there's a plague, all this stuff. And I was like, wait a minute, that's not God. God, you said no pestilence shall come near my dwelling. You are my strong tower. You're the shield of my faith. And all of a sudden, bam, I was lit up like a live wire. I was walking through the airport with chills for like 20 minutes. I had a different kind of strut in my walk. I felt like if anything were to come in this space, it would get eaten up by the presence of God, right? And so I took that thought captive and I made it obey Christ. And then boom, I was lit up with the presence and power of God. So I started sharing this with him. All of a sudden the power of God hits him. He flies back in the car. It's like, Dad, chills all over him. He starts like prophesying. We get home. He's running all over the house going, Dad, I think I'm faster now. And he's like sprinting and he's like, Dad, have I grown? Am I taller? He's just believing all this excess. But he was in a place of like a few minutes, 20 minutes prior, fear, insecurity, all this. To all of a sudden, we take that thought captive, we replace it with Christ, and all of a sudden he has belief that he can run like Elijah, and he's out sprinting everywhere, you know? But there's power in how you see a situation, right? So the next morning, I begin to tell him about this. There's this Hebraic concept of a good eye and a bad eye, okay? So a good eye is the Hebrew word ayin tovah. Say ayin tovah. Bad eye is ayin ra. Say ayin ra. Jesus talks about this in Matthew 6:23. He says this, the eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy or your eye is good, your whole body will be full of light, right? But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If that light in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? So the context of this in one of the Gospels is really talking about money. He's like, don't be anxious about anything, what you're gonna wear, what you're gonna eat, whatever. Life is more than that, right? Set your mind on the things that are above, the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added to you. Is that like jet fighters or something around here? It's the Air Force Base. I was like, is God showing up here? What's happening right now? All right, come on. So I began to share with him this idea of a good eye and a bad eye because it's how it affects your body. And so I took him downstairs in my house, and I got this picture on the wall that I took about 2010. And this girl that I know, she ran this organization that there's this competition for the top artists and architects in Dallas. They had to come up with a piece that depicts overcoming poverty, okay? And it was for a charity called Dwell with Dignity that helps people come over that. And I had just started taking pictures, and she goes, I entered you in this competition. I go, you did what? With the top artists and architects in Dallas, I just started picking up my camera. You entered me in the competition? Yeah, I entered you in the competition. And I was like, I just started taking pictures. What are you doing? I can't do this. But how many people know you need people that believe in you and the gift of God that's in you more than you believe about yourself, right? And I know you guys are in a place like that where you got prophets prophesying over you to get you out of your comfort zones. And so she threw me in this thing, and I'm scared to death. And I'm thinking, okay, how do I come up with a piece that depicts overcoming poverty? So I'm thinking of like all these like dramatic things of a guy in a helicopter stepping out, pulling somebody out of the slums of India. And I was like, I can't afford to do that picture. You know, how does that work? Then I started to back up a little bit and I go, okay, what is poverty? And this phrase hit me. Poverty is a mindset that always sees lack, right? Because you can be wealthy and never have enough. I've been around wealthy people. They have a poverty spirit. They never have enough. They need more because they don't have enough. And I've also been around people that we would say, okay, they maybe don't have a lot of money, but they're totally content. They're wealthy in spirit, right? Because that's what Paul said, I've learned the secret of life, how to live abased or abound. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And so I was sharing that with my wife, and it was a deadline before we had to get like our piece turned in. And she comes out of the shower, she goes, what if you just take a picture of a glass half full? I go, that's so cliche, but it's perfect. Let's do that. So I did this thing called a light painting, and you take a picture in the dark, and you paint with a flashlight, and so the camera captures the light. And I took this picture of a glass half full, I painted it, I printed it on metal, and I wrote this thing under it, that poverty's perspective, and I shared some of the same things, and I said, if you change the way you look at the world, your world will change. And people were walking up in this competition, they were walking up to this picture of a glass half full, half empty, and they would look at it and start weeping. And I would look at my wife, and I'm like, this is a glass half full. They're weeping. What is going on? This is the most anointed glass of water ever. And then this lady who runs the organization called Dwell with Dignity, she comes up and she goes, that's it. She goes, the people that make it out of my program have this perspective. So I looked at my son and I said, hey, buddy, what do you see? And he goes, it's a glass half empty. I go, look again. What do you see? He goes, it's half full. I go, it all depends on how you see, right? If you see the negative side of things, your body's gonna be filled with darkness. But if you see with the eyes of light or the eyes of faith, then your body's gonna be filled with light. Later that same day, we're driving home and all of a sudden we see a massive groundhog on the side of the road. Have you guys ever seen a groundhog? These things are big. I think I've seen one once in my life, but it stuck out to me because it was so odd seeing a groundhog on the side of the road. And then immediately this thought hit me, I need to introduce my kids to the movie Groundhog Day. Who's not seen the movie Groundhog Day? Okay, you got a lot of people seeing Groundhog Day. Great. Did you know that's one of the most spiritual films of the last 20 years, 30 years? You're like, what are you talking about, Willis? So what's interesting about that film, if you haven't seen the film, it's just this simple comedy with Bill Murray. He's a weatherman. His name is Phil Connor. He's got to go to Punxsutawney, this small town. He's got to report on the groundhog. And the idea is if the groundhog sees its shadow, then they're going to be stuck in winter for 6 more weeks, right? So he goes there. He's this cranky, pessimistic weatherman, seeing the negative in everybody and everything. He reports on the groundhog. All of a sudden, he tries to leave town. And all of a sudden, he's stuck in this winter storm. And all of a sudden, he wakes up to having the same day over and over and over and over and over and over again. But if you don't realize that his name is Phil Connor, the groundhog's name actually is Punxsutawney Phil. Phil is the metaphor, the groundhog is the metaphor for Phil Connor. Because the groundhog sees the shadow, Phil Connor sees the shadows in everybody and everything. And so he wakes up having the same day over and over again. But he doesn't realize that God is actually calling out to him every single day. He wakes up in the morning to this song of God singing over him. And I'm going to sing to you, and this is going to be really painful because I'm not a singer. My wife's a singer. But the song goes like this. Put your little hand in mine. There ain't no hill or mountain we can't climb. Babe, da, 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 da. I got you, babe, da, 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 da. So God's calling out to him every day. So put your hand in mine, I got you. But he doesn't want to hear it. He's slamming the music and he starts to just live completely selfishly for himself, manipulating every situation till he finally gets to the end of himself. And then he realizes there's this girl in his life. Her name is Rita, right? Rita, the name Rita means bringer of light. His name is Phil. Phil comes from phileo, which means love. He doesn't know his true identity as love. She comes into his life, the bringer of light, to reveal to him his true identity, which is love. She starts to teach him about 16th century French poetry and love, all these beautiful things. He starts to sculpt and play piano and beautify the earth. And then he's reading poetry one night, laying next to her, and he's like, wait a minute, only God can make a tree. He has this revelation that's all about God. He starts living for everybody else. And the maker of the film puts these little Easter eggs in the film. If you ever watch it, you'll see the sign in the back of the hotel. It says, unselfishness. You'll see them sitting down at a little table, and it says the Spirit in the background. And then as we're watching the movie, one of the guys turns to Phil in the movie and goes, hey, buddy, you seem like you're a guy that sees the glass half empty. And I looked at my son. I was like, this is God speaking, because I didn't know that was in the film. But we had just talked about it that morning, right? But as he began to live for others, all of a sudden he broke out into a new day because he saw differently, right? He began to see not according to the shadows, but according to the light. And he broke into a new day, right? So I believe God wants to break us into a new day. We're in a time, a really interesting time in history, where if you look at specifically in America, just about every single system is at a breaking point. It's in need of reformation. The political system, the food system, the education system, the pharmaceutical system, the health, you name it, it's in need of reformation. And if you look at the news, you're gonna be depressed. Because the news is full of darkness. You're gonna be staring at the shadows. But if you can see it from God's perspective, you're gonna see this is one of the most opportune times to be alive. this is those moments where the light and the darkness is so stark, just a little bit of light in a dark place, people are gonna be like, what is going on with you? Who are you? Why do you see so differently? Right? But to do this, to see this way, not only to see this way, it's gonna take faith. It's gonna take a lot of risk to step out of our comfort zones, to step into the light. You guys have heard John Wimber, how he spells faith, right? R-I-S-K, right? That's how faith is spelled. It's not spelled S-A-F-E. It's not how you spell faith. And for whatever reason, beginning in 2020, the most phrase I heard from people around me was, be safe out there, guys. Hey, be safe. You better be safe. Be safe out there, guys. I started looking in the Bible. I started to realize, there's no command in the Bible that says be safe. And I started thinking about Joshua and Caleb in this moment where it's like, okay, guys, God's talking to him. I can hear him just saying, all right, guys, it's time to enter the promised land. It's on you now. The land is filled with milk and honey. Your promises are before you. I've prepared this land. There are giants in this land. You have to see that there are giants. But be safe out there, guys. He didn't say that, right? He said be strong and courageous, right? So we need courage. We need to be able to have faith to step into what God has for us if we have eyes to see it rightly. Because we could see the giants. They are there. I'm like, God, really? It's promised land. Well, you got to have giants in it, And I had this dream one night. I'm in the dream and I'm so mad, I'm angry because the devil keeps attacking me in my dream. And I'm like yelling at God, I'm like, God, why do you allow the devil to keep attacking us? Why do you allow this? And all of a sudden I look behind me, there was all these men lined up like Braveheart in battle array. God didn't say anything, but those men behind me go, so we can have victory. I had to look again. I had to see from another perspective. I could look at the giants as, oh, they're gonna kill me. Or I could go, oh, wait a minute. They're there so we can have victory. I don't know about you, but I like to win. Talked to my man over here this morning. He says, I'm just called to break stuff. I'm like, so is Jesus. He came to destroy the works of the devil. I don't know about you, but it's fun to break things. It's what we're called to do, right? So I want to talk to you. I want us to look with fresh eyes at the story of the spies going to look at the promised land, okay? I want to talk about how we see. So if you can turn to Numbers 13. I want to talk about the story of the spies. We're going to talk about Numbers 13, verse 17 through 20. And what's interesting is I was preparing this on Wednesday. A friend of mine called me and he's like, hey, have you ever studied the Hebrew calendar? And I was like, yeah, I have. And he starts talking about kind of the dire straits in the month of Av. Av is a Hebrew month. It's the month actually that we are in right now. And then on Thursday, the next day, I was looking at this. And the 9th of Av, have you guys ever heard of the 9th of Av? Okay, the 9th of Av is a historical day in the Jewish calendar. And it's commemorated by the day that the spies came back to Israel and gave an evil report. So that was this week, actually. Thursday was that day in time in history. And I was preparing this. I was like, okay, wait a minute. I really feel like we are in God's time for what we're talking about today. So Numbers 13, first of all, Numbers 13:1, the Lord said to Moses, send the men out to spy the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the people of Israel. Key. It was their promise. He was going to give it to them, right? But they wanted to see it first. They wanted to go in, and so they selected 12 of the best leaders to go in 40 days, check out the promised land, see what this land looks like, right? So verse 17, he says this, Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan and said to them, go up into the Negev and go up into the hill country and see what the land is. Whether the people who dwell in it are strong or weak. First of all, he says, see what the land is, whether they're strong or weak, whether they are few or many, whether the land that they dwell in is good or bad, whether the cities that they dwell in are camps or strongholds, and whether the land is rich or poor, whether there are trees in it or not, but be safe. Be of good courage and bring some of the fruit in it. Right? So they were to go up. Their job was to go and see. Right? All right, let's look at how they saw, verse 25. At the end of the 40 days, they returned from spying out the land. They came to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation of the people of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. Are we up here together? All right, good. They brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. They told them, we came to the land which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey. This is its fruit. However, the people who dwell in the land are strong. The cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the Negev. The Hittites and Jebusites and the Amorites dwell in the hill country. And the Canaanites dwell by the sea along the Jordan. But Caleb quieted the crowd. I hear Caleb like, shh, guys, stop. Shh, shh, shh. Will you look again? Shh, please. Let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are able to overcome it. Right? They saw, Joshua and Caleb saw with the eyes of faith. They saw opportunity. They said, we're able to overcome this. God is with us. But the other 10 leaders were like, look, there's no way. The land's great, but look at these guys, look at this problem, look at this problem, and look at this problem. Basically magnifying the enemy, saying this is too big for God. God can't do this, even though he had just done what he had just done in their lives. But Caleb, Joshua, they had a different spirit. Verse 31, then it says, then the men who had gone up with him said, we're not able to go up against the people, for they're stronger than we. So they brought to the people of Israel a bad report of the land that they had spied out, saying, the land which we have gone out to spy out is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people that saw it, or we saw it, are of great height. And there's the Nephilim there, the sons of Anak, and we seemed to them like ourselves, grasshoppers. So how did they see? They saw themselves as small inside of the problem. They saw their God as small inside of their problem. Then all the congregation raised a loud cry, and the people wept that night. And the people grumbled against Moses and Aaron. And the whole congregation said, would that we had died in the land of Egypt. So that evil report infected an entire generation full of fear, right? The power of faith in the enemy infected the generation, so they couldn't go forward. And so because of that, some Hebrew scholars will say that a curse came upon the people of Israel. And if you look at history on the 9th of Av, what happens to Israel because of the report of the spies throughout history, it's kind of trippy. So the first temple was destroyed in Israel on the 9th of Av. The second temple was destroyed on the 9th of Av. The Jews were kicked out of Spain in 1290 on the 9th of Av. They were kicked out of England in the 1300s, I believe, on the 9th of Av. World War I started on the 9th of Av. The death camps in Warsaw began on the 9th of Av. In 2005, the Jews were expelled out of Gaza on the 9th of Av. It's fascinating, right? Thank God we live under another covenant. Thank God for his mercy and his grace, that he can redeem the time. He can make up for our mistakes where we have seen maybe not according to God's plan. Y'all ready to look again? As we continue on in the story, you guys know the story, but Joshua and Caleb, as the Israelites began to complain and murmur about their situation, complain about how big their giants were, Joshua and Caleb said in verse 14, verse 9, It says, only don't rebel against God. Don't fear the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their protection is removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. I mean, think about the difference in perspective. 10 of them said, look how big they are. They're the giants. They're going to take us out. And these other guys, just these 2 young bucks, they're going, they are our bread. This is what strengthens us. What if that's our daily bread, the giants that we're supposed to face? That's a different perspective. What if those giants that are in your future are their guardian guarding your destinies? What if they're guarding the treasure that you're supposed to keep and inherit? And what if you need that battle to strengthen you so you can handle the blessing that's to come? What if you saw from God's perspective? If you did, your whole body would be full of light. But if you see from the enemy's perspective, you're gonna feel fear and anxiety, insecurity, right? And you have these anxiety attacks. Well, you know that if you see from God's perspective, you can have a faith attack? I'm serious. I'm dead serious. That faith can overtake you. It happened to my son. He's literally having a faith attack in my car, getting home, sprinting around. He went from a place of darkness in his body to a place of light. Total faith attack. Anything's possible. I think I'm faster. I'm growing. What is that? That is our inheritance. That is our inheritance, if you can see rightly. Let's look again. So I want to talk briefly about, these stories as it relates to the promise and the promised land. I want to talk briefly, share 2 stories as it relates to dealing with tragedy, okay? So in 2017, I had just gotten back off the mission field in northern Iraq, working in refugee camps. We were rescuing sex slaves from ISIS. I heard some of the most crazy stories I've ever heard in my life. I get home, kind of dealing with the trauma of that. My brother commits suicide. Devastating. Within the next month, I dealt with a betrayal of a really close friend, extremely painful. Right after that, my children's minister, who had beaten cancer the year prior supernaturally, gone out of his body, comes ravaging back through his body. He dies a month later. A month after that, my grandmother passed away. A week later, a good friend of mine dies of a heart attack. It was like bang, 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 bang. And I was like, I got to the point where I couldn't think. My brain was like just unclear, foggy. And I told my pastor, my friend Michael Miller, I said, bro, I need a break. He goes, bro, take a sabbatical, go. And I went to the beach. And I'm processing all this with the Lord. I'm like, God, what's going on with this? And it just felt like my world was caving in, closing in on me. And I started journaling with God, and he goes, that which you perceive to be your tomb is actually your cocoon. That which you perceive to be your tomb is actually your cocoon, because I could have stayed in the tomb place. The tomb place is death, it's darkness, it's insecurity, it's fear. But cocoon, ooh, I like that. There's hope in that. I know God's about to do something in my life. He's gonna transform me. So I finished writing that down. Faith hits my heart. My body starts to get filled with light. I step out into the waters of the ocean. There's nobody around, about 50 yards in. And all of a sudden, this butterfly starts flying. Right by my head, big old monarch butterfly. And I'm like, I didn't know butterflies flew over the ocean, you know? And then all of a sudden, another one. And then another one. Then another one. Probably 150 monarch butterflies fly by my head over the ocean. I'm going, all right, God, I hear you. That which I perceived to be my tomb is actually my cocoon. I was able to hold on to that right in the midst of the storm. Fast forward to 2020, and we're in Tampa visiting my family. It's the height of the lockdowns. It's the height of don't leave your house, stay 6 feet apart, don't touch, don't do nothing. You know, and Sean Foyt comes to town. And he's like, hey, bro, I heard you're in Tampa. Why don't you grab your wife? Let's do a little worship. Let's rumble. You know, so I'm like, all right, let's go. You know, because I understand this dynamic. When the world's in fear and says retreat, shrink back, I know that's when God's saying time to advance. And so I knew that dynamic, but it's like every media outlet on the planet is coming against saying, don't do what you're about to do, right? Then I go to my parents' house, and it was September 18th. And September 18th was my brother's birthday, and he was from Tampa. So it was a day of mourning for my family. So I go and I bring them flowers, and I'm feeling all the emotions of what they're feeling, yet at the same time, we're about to have to go do this big event in the middle of town. It's a lot of emotions. So I go, okay, God, what are you saying here? Help me see this rightly, because I'm feeling some kind of way. And he goes, it's time to plunder hell on your brother's behalf. And I was like, I like that, because I know that what the enemy meant for harm, God's gonna flip the script. The enemy can't take something out of your life and do some kind of damage without paying a hefty price for it. He's got to pay for what he's taken out of your life. He's got to pay. That's my king. That's my God. 30, 60, 100-fold, whatever it is, I don't know, but he's got to pay something. I'm sticking on that 100-fold. So faith hits me. I began to look at that situation differently. My body gets hit full of light. I go to the event. First thing Sean starts talking about was the first event they did on the Golden Gate Bridge. If I can get the band to start coming up real quick, that'd be great. The Golden Gate Bridge, and they were there. There was all these police there, and they were on suicide patrol because so many people were committing suicide because of the lockdowns. That's the first thing he starts talking about at this event. So I knew I was getting set up. And if you guys have seen the film, I have this little part inserted in the film, but he at the end of the thing, people get saved, baptized, he just hands me the mic. He goes, hey, do you have anything? And I go, I do. And I started thinking about Tampa. And, you know, Tampa's known for buccaneers and pirates and all this stuff. And so I was like, okay, let me look again at that. I go, there's a godly version of that thing. And so I began to speak from the mic. I go, hey, all you buccaneers and pirates in here. I go, you know there's a godly version of that thing? I go, the godly version is when Jesus died, he went down into death and Hades. He took back the keys of death and Hades, and he plundered hell. I go, we're gonna plunder hell today. And I began to share the story of my brother and how he was bound in darkness and how he had died of suicide. He was from Tampa and it was his birthday. And I said, I don't wanna lose any more brothers and sisters to suicide. If you're struggling with suicide or depression, I want you to come down here. I wanna see this broken off your life. I wanna love you, I wanna hug you. I'm just like blubbering, weeping, all this kind of stuff. All these men come rushing to the front. We have this moment where we're just weeping and praying and contending, and then this moment goes viral around the world, and people are messaging in saying they're feeling their own suicidal thoughts and depression breaking off their lives. And then that becomes the impetus for a film, which then goes around the world and is still touching people's lives to this day. But I had to look again. I had to see the situation in a different way. I had to see the trauma and the circumstance that I was in from God's perspective. Because if I saw it from my perspective or the enemy's perspective, he's gonna win. I'm gonna be in darkness. I'm gonna be like the Israelites having their own Groundhog Day, going around the mountain over and over and over again for 40 years. And that's not our lot. That's not our destiny. God wants us to see in a different way. So I'm gonna have Meredith come up and sing this song over you guys once she gets her mic. I want you to join in this song, and then we're gonna pray afterwards, okay? And it's interesting because one of the songs in the front end of worship actually touched on this theme, that God's not done with you yet. So, you see?
Just knows, and I know you won't withhold. You're not finished yet. If there's breath still in my lungs, I could swear that you're not done. There's still time for me to run. You're not finished yet. And oh, you're making old things new again. And oh, just open my eyes to see the glory of you that's hidden in treasure to find, the promise I seek. So look again, look again, look again, 'cause you're not finished yet. Placed him in the tomb to rest, but was it finished? Yeah. When the stone was rolled away, they beheld an empty grave. Don't believe me, look again, 'cause he is arisen, yeah. And oh, you're making all things new again. And treasure to find, the promise I seek. So look again, so look again, look again, 'cause you're not finished yet. Oh, and oh, you're making all things new again. And oh, just open my eyes to the glory of you that's hidden in me. It's treasure to find, the promise I seek. So look again, look again, so look again, 'cause you're not finished yet. Best, you ain't seen nothing yet. When you think you've seen it all, well, just go look again. When you think you've seen his best, you ain't seen nothing yet. When you think you've seen it all, just go look again. When you think you've seen his best, you ain't seen nothing yet. When you think you've seen it all, just go look again. When you think you've seen his best, you ain't seen nothing yet. When you think you've seen it all, just go look again. And oh, you're making all things new again. And oh, just open my eyes to see the glory of you that's hidden in me. It's treasure to find, the promise I see. So look again, look again, so look again, 'cause you're not finished yet. He's not done yet.
Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Look again. Look again. Hey, I want to speak to somebody in this room that maybe you've just thought, you know, I can't do this thing with God. I'm not good enough. I'm too far gone. God, how can God use someone like me? And in the reality is, without God, we're all that way. But if you look again, you look to see what He did on the cross, the most valuable creation that has ever existed came took upon himself all your guilt, all your shame, all your mistakes, all your insecurities, all your failures upon himself so that he could give you his life, so that you could be a son and daughter of God. There's nothing more beautiful than that. It's the divine exchange. He wants to take you into the place of promise, but you have to let go of the old. You have to lay down your life. You have to fully surrender it all, and it's scary. But here's the promise, that if you lose your life, you'll find your life. Everything that you've been looking for is hidden in him. It's in him. It's in him.